Okay, so I got a job. I know. I can already hear some of you. Margaret, you have a channel about cleaning and decluttering. What do you mean you got a job? And more importantly, why? I am going to tell you everything because I think the honest version of this story is more useful than the polished version. And because I suspect that more of you than I might expect will recognize something of yourselves in what I am about to describe. Let me go back to about 8 months ago. I had been retired for 7 years. The house was in the best shape it had ever been. My routines were working. The garden was lovely. I was making videos for this channel, which I genuinely enjoy, and the channel was growing in ways that still surprise me sometimes. By every reasonable measure, things were good. And yet, there was something underneath the good that I did not have a clean word for. A kind of flatness that would arrive, not every day, but often enough, in the mid-afternoon, when the morning work was done and the evening had not yet begun. I would sit in the kitchen with my tea and look out at the garden and feel not unhappy exactly, but not quite full either, like a room with good furniture that still somehow feels slightly empty. I tried to push through it. I told myself it was simply what retirement felt like after the initial adjustment period. 7 years is a long adjustment period, but I was willing to give it the benefit of the doubt. I added things to my routine, more reading, more time in the garden, a new volunteer commitment at the library on Tuesdays. These helped, but the flatness kept returning. Then something happened that I want to tell you about, because it is the real reason I started thinking about all of this differently. I was talking to Daniel on the phone one evening, and I mentioned, trying to keep it light, that I had been feeling a bit purposeless lately. And he said, very gently, something that landed with more weight than he probably intended. Mom, when did you last do something that made you nervous? I sat with that question for 2 days. The honest answer was, I genuinely could not remember. That is when I understood what was missing. Not activity, not even purpose in the vague sense. The particular kind of aliveness that comes from attempting something where the outcome is genuinely uncertain, where you might succeed or you might not, where there is something actually at stake. So I started looking for work at 72. Let me tell you how that went. First, why working again made sense, and not just emotionally. I want to be honest about the practical side of this as well, because I think leaving it out would be dishonest in a way that would make this story less useful to people who might be thinking about similar things. Retirement is financially different from working. My situation is comfortable. I am not in difficulty. But comfortable is not the same as having the kind of financial freedom that allows you to do things without calculating them first. A trip I want to take, a home repair I want to do properly rather than adequately. The ability to help Daniel or the grandchildren with something significant if the occasion arose. These are things that a retired income handles differently than a working income. I have never been someone who needed a lot of money to feel secure, but I have also always understood in a practical way that financial autonomy is one of the foundations of personal autonomy. The ability to make choices without needing to ask whether the budget allows it is a form of freedom that is easy to undervalue until you feel its edges tightening slightly. This was not desperation, but it was real. And I think being honest about it matters, because the idea that older people who want to work are doing it entirely for fulfillment and never for practical reasons is a comfortable fiction that is not always true, and that can make people feel there's something slightly shameful about the financial dimension of the decision. There is not. Money enables choices. Choices enable life. That is simply how it works. Tell me in the comments, if you are retired, do you ever think about the financial dimension of what you gave up when you stopped working? I ask without judgment, because I think most people do, and most people do not say so directly. Second, what the idleness was actually doing to me. I want to spend some time on this because I think it is the part of the story that is most universally relevant, regardless of whether working again is the right answer for anyone else. There is a quality of mental sharpness that comes from being regularly challenged, from encountering problems you do not already know how to solve, from having to learn something because the situation requires it, rather than because you chose to study it for its own sake. This sharpness is different from the sharpness of reading interesting books, which I do constantly, or maintaining a home well, which I also do. It requires novelty and consequence in combination. Something new, where getting it right actually matters. Retirement, for all its genuine gifts, can quietly remove this combination from daily life. The routines that make a retired life comfortable and well managed are by definition things you already know how to do. The confidence of competence is real and valuable, but it is a different quality from the aliveness of figuring something out. And I found, more honestly than I would have liked, that the absence of that aliveness had been accumulating in me for longer than I had admitted to myself. The mid-afternoon flatness I describe was not boredom in the ordinary sense. It was the particular hollowness that comes from a life that is missing something to push against, something that does not yield easily, something that requires you to be uncertain and to persist through the uncertainty. I've spoken with enough women of my age and older to know that I am not unusual in this. The transition to retirement is often celebrated as a kind of arrival, and in many ways it is. But the arrival brings its own challenges, and one of them is the challenge of creating genuine challenge in a life where the external structures that used to create it have been removed. Before I continue, a quick word. If you enjoy this channel and want to support my work, just look directly below the video player, right next to the subscribe button, and click the button that says join. That is how you become a Smart Organizer. Smart Organizers members get exclusive videos, a loyalty badge in the comments, and custom channel emojis. I would love to have you there. Third, the decluttering that had to happen first. Now we are in my usual territory, and I'm going to stay here for a while because this part connects directly to the work I do on this channel, and because I think it is genuinely important in a way that goes beyond the immediate decision about working. Before I could seriously look at what kind of work I wanted to do and how I wanted to fit it into my life, I had to look honestly at the life I had built. Not the surface of it, which, as I said, was in genuinely good order, but the internal structure, how I spent my time, what I was doing with the hours, what I was actually prioritizing versus what I told myself I was prioritizing. And what I found, when I looked honestly, was that I had been filling my days in ways that were comfortable and familiar, rather than in ways that were fully intentional. This is a form of clutter that does not show up in a closet or on a counter. It is the clutter of habits that have outlived their usefulness, of activities continued from inertia rather than genuine choice, of time spent on things that feel productive without actually producing anything that matters to the person spending the time. The same problem in a different form, the same solution in a different form. I did what I do with physical clutter. I went through it honestly, one area at a time. I looked at every regular commitment in my week and asked the same question I ask about objects when I am decluttering. Does this genuinely belong to the life I am living right now? Does it serve who I actually am rather than who I used to be or who I think I should be? Some things pass that question easily. The Tuesday volunteer shifts at the library, the garden, this channel. These are things that are genuinely mine, that reflect who I am and what I value, that I would choose again if I were choosing fresh. Other things did not pass as cleanly. Commitments I had taken on because they seemed like the right thing to do, rather than because I genuinely wanted to do them. Routines I maintained from habit without examining whether they still served me. Relationships I managed dutifully, but that had not offered genuine reciprocity in years. Releasing those things, quietly and without drama, created space. And into that space, the question of what I actually wanted to add became clearer than it had been when everything was full. Please subscribe if you are not yet subscribed. Every week I share what I've learned about maintaining a life and a home that genuinely works at this stage. And this kind of conversation, the messier and more personal ones, are among the ones I value most. Fourth, what I actually found and what it is teaching me. I want to be specific about this because vague inspiration is less useful than concrete honesty. What I found after thinking carefully about what I had to offer and what I actually wanted to do was something adjacent to what I had done for 34 years as a librarian. I am now working part-time at a small local nonprofit that helps older adults navigate public resources, including everything from housing assistance to technology access to legal aid referrals. I work 3 mornings a week. I am not the director, and I do not want to be. I am the person who sits across a desk from someone who is confused or frightened or overwhelmed and helps them figure out what is available and what the next step is. I am very good at this. 34 years of helping people find what they needed in a library, of being the patient and organized presence in a room full of people who did not know quite what they were looking for, turned out to be excellent preparation for sitting with someone who has received a complicated letter about their benefits and cannot make sense of it. And it is genuinely challenging. Every person who walks through the door has a different situation and different needs and different levels of urgency. The resources are complicated and they change. The navigation requires me to learn things I did not already know, which is precisely the combination I had been missing. I go in on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings. I am home by noon. The afternoons are mine, and they feel more genuinely restful than they did before I started working again, because I am bringing something with me when I sit down for my afternoon tea. A real morning's work. Something attempted and managed and occasionally genuinely difficult. The rest has context. It means something against something else now. The flatness is gone. I do not know how else to say it. The mid-afternoon hollow that I had been navigating for longer than I admitted is simply not there anymore. The day has weight to it again. Good weight. Tell me in the comments, have you ever returned to work after retirement, or have you considered it? And if you have, what brought you back, and what did you find? I am curious about other people's experiences with this because I suspect there are many different versions of the story I am telling. Fifth, what this means for the channel and for everything else. I want to address this directly because some of you may be wondering. The channel is not going anywhere. If anything, having something external to push against has made me more engaged with it, not less. The discipline of the 3 working mornings structures my week in a way that makes the rest of the week more productive, not less. I am writing better scripts now than I was 6 months ago. I think the aliveness carries over. The house is exactly as it was. I tend it every day in small ways, and it stays in good order. The garden is managed, the routines hold. I had built a domestic life that runs efficiently enough that adding 3 half-days of work per week has not destabilized it in any meaningful way. This is one of the unexpected benefits of having worked hard at the home management piece for several years. The system is robust enough to absorb additional demands without collapsing. What I want to offer from all of this, to anyone who recognizes the flatness I described at the beginning, are the question Daniel asked me about when I last did something that made me nervous. It is worth taking seriously. Not everyone's answer will look like mine. Working again is not the right answer for every person reading or watching this, and I am not suggesting it is. But the underlying question is worth sitting with. What is the thing in your life right now that pushes back? What requires you to be uncertain and to persist through the uncertainty? If you cannot answer that question quickly, that is worth paying attention to. The work of a life does not end at 65 or 70 or any particular age. It changes form. The chapter I am in now is genuinely different from the chapter I was in when I was working full-time, and different from the chapter of the early retirement years. But it is still a chapter with its own challenges and its own growth and its own kind of aliveness. And I am glad, in a way I had almost stopped expecting to feel, to be in it. I want to hear from you now. In the comments, tell me whether any of this resonates. Tell me whether you have felt the flatness I described, or whether you found your own version of something that pushed back. Or tell me that I am being ridiculous and that retirement is supposed to be restful, and who said anything about needing to be challenged? I will take all of it. I read every comment, and I find these conversations genuinely the most valuable part of this channel. And please subscribe if you are not yet subscribed. Every week I share what I have learned, in the house and outside of it, about living well and living fully at this stage of life. I will see you next week.